So you know, I'm gonna get to you guys in a second. I have to stop because this is like, Jimmy Blanton, in my view, is the father of the modern jazz bass. Because if you listen to bass players before him, what they were doing and what the bands were doing, and then suddenly he shows up for like 2 years, 2, maybe 3 years, and then he's gone. He dies like when he's 21. But anyway, he shows up for that little bit of time, does a couple of, mainly with Duke, but does maybe a couple other things, and then he's gone. And then after that, everybody's stealing from what he did. It's really true. I mean, other people were doing other things, don't misunderstand me, but he definitely changed the direction of the jazz bass, because suddenly he's playing, he's like out front, he's playing his lines, you can hear his lines a little bit clearer, and he's like playing interesting lines, not just kind of felt, but actually heard. And then he starts soloing, he's bowing with the, you know, because he was a violinist before. So then he starts bowing and he's picking and he's playing all this stuff, and that changed the direction of the bass. It really did. That recording, or those recordings, those really are monumental, really. So hats off to you, Em. You learned that you guys are playing that?
Yeah, we learned the
Pitter Panther Patter. Nice, nice. Yes, we just connected. Not to anybody else, not that I didn't connect with anybody else. Mingus is like, you know, Mingus was the second most prolific composer in America, behind Duke. People kind of let that kind of fall by the wayside, but he was an amazing composer, band leader, bass player, crazy guy, but he really had a lot going on. So I'm with you too. I can't sleep on Mingus. I got to give her some dap too. And you said Mingus. Mingus, yes, yes. Oh, I got to give him some dap too. I love Marcus Miller. He makes me want to go back and play electric bass. But then I stop because it's him. You know what's interesting? You just made me think of something. Thanks for mentioning it, is that sort of we here in America tend to wrongly just kind of put all of these amazing rhythms just into one little umbrella, and we just call it Latin. And there's a lot more than just, it ain't just Latin. There's a lot of different cultures and different rhythms and feelings that are not just Latin. I mean, because, like, for example, Cuban is not the same as Venezuelan, or El Salvadorian is not the same as Brazilian, or Mexico is not the same as Puerto Rican. Even the Spanish that in these different places is spoken differently. So, yeah, thanks for saying that. And I'm sort of revisiting a lot of those same, what we're talking about, a lot of the different rhythms, because it's unique. Those are unique. It's not, I don't just kind of, oh, it's all Latin stuff. But a lot of people do, and I think that's not being real respectful. And studious too, because a lot to learn. Oh yeah, well, Ray Brown, gosh. So thanks for saying Ray Brown, because that goes back to what you were saying. Have you heard the Ray Brown and Duke Ellington version of the same thing? That's another seminal recording. So I'm gonna back up and ask you guys the same questions. We're just kind of getting to know each other a little bit here. So you guys bear with me, so I'm just, did I say this is him? Oh, okay, all right. He's playing bass with his left hand, so that's why. He's a keyboard player, but he's playing bass with his left hand. So the first question was why we started playing bass. And then the second one so far was like, what are we listening to and who you studying and checking out. And so I started us off by saying, I started on this one for all the wrong reasons. I thought it was easy. I thought I could meet girls. I thought I didn't have to practice. I thought it was just simple, just stand up there and look like I was playing and be cool, you know. All of that's wrong, like completely not good. Yeah, tuba, I played tuba in high school too. That was like, I had to get into a groove of doing that, you know, because it's, you know, that big mouthpiece and fingers. And then you had to sit down and play the thing, you know, not a sousaphone, you walk, but tuba. Larry Graham was the guy that started thumping the bass.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
He's the guy that started that.
But you know how he started it?
In church. The drummer couldn't make it.
Well, no, his mother got rid of the drummer. They had a trio.
Oh.
I used to live out in San Jose.
Okay.
California. So
Uh-huh.
They got rid of the. She got rid of
The drummer.
drummer.
Right, and he needed
had
to.
have a, yeah.
He had to keep the beat. Right.
Yeah, accommodated it.
That was in church. There was a church trio.
Yeah.
Right.
They went out and doing gigs. And then somebody put him and Sly together.
Right, and that was it.
Yeah.
That was the beginning of the. Those early recordings with Sly and Graham. It's amazing. Actually, one of my groups is the DC Bass Choir. And we've done like trio, quartet, even quintet. But let me tell you, that's a tough group.
Yeah.
And I say that it has nothing to do with anybody's playing. Big Dave can attest to this. It's nothing to do with anybody's playing. It's in that situation, everybody has to have spot on intonation. Everybody's got to have spot on timing. And everybody's got to play their part. Now, I say that because the last one I said you have to play your part, is that most of the time when you guys play, there's usually what, one bass player in the band, right?
Got all that space, yeah.
Usually just one bass player in the band, right? That makes sense? But suddenly, you got 3 to 5 bass players. So if me and Big Dave are in the group, I need Big Dave to play tenor and stay in the tenor voice. I need M to play treble or the top line or the melody line and stay in that voice, because then it sounds like a choir. Otherwise, it's like muddy. Everybody's just playing bass, which is great. I love that. But for it to be musical, it needs to be parts, sort of like a choir in a church, something like that. Hank Jones, one of the finest human beings ever that I've ever met in my little life. First class man, his musicianship is just unbelievable, unbelievable. The guy was in the stride era, and then he came all the way up to, 2000. And he was always current in all of those eras of music from start to finish of his life. I was more nervous than possible. And I wasn't supposed to be playing with him, actually. We were on a festival, and the bass player had to leave. By the way, just so you know, on the festival, the house rhythm section was Louis Nash, Christian McBride, Hank Jones, and Herb Ellis. That was the rhythm section. McBride had to leave and go to something else. So that's how I happened to just be there. And I'm up here holding the bass in amazement. Like, what was going on around me was amazing. I was just smiling and just like, if I tried to go in this direction on the bass, Hank Jones was already there. If I tried to go in this direction, he had already gone around the block and met me there. I mean, that's how, like, anything I did, it was right. I've never in my life had anything like that before. That's amazing. So that's who was on the gig. I was so nervous. It was, shaking. Hands and my legs, everything was just shaking. But we got through it, and he came up and he gave me a big hug, and that's when I just broke down. I was like, oh, this is heaven. This is it. So, but again, he was just the nicest man you could ever meet. He really, really was. When you talk to him, he's just, matter of fact, you would even know, if you didn't know who he was, you pass him on the street, and you talk to him, you just think he's just a nice guy. And he's a very nice guy. But it wasn't like he was telling folks about his amazing career as a musician. Anyway, I could go on and on about that. You guys, I said, Hank Jones, I mean, come on. So you know that there were actually 3 of them. No, 4. There were 4 of them. 4 of the Jones brothers. So Hank Jones, Thad Jones, Elvin Jones, but people don't know that Elvin actually had a twin brother. He had a twin that died at birth. And Hank Jones told me, he said he believed that the way Elvin Jones played was because he heard what his brother was doing. So that's the way he played. It sounds like 2 people. And if you think about it, kind of makes sense. So I'm gonna go back to that thought for just a second. I would submit to you, well, let me ask you a question. I won't submit it to you. Let me ask you guys a question. Have you ever heard some music that you like where the bass and the drums were not like locked down? Have you ever heard music that you really, really like where bass and drums were not like married at the hip? And the reason I ask that question is because I think bass and drums are the DNA of any kind of music that you hear. Because everything else is built on top of that. Everything else is built on top of the bass and drums. Like if you're, like for instance, if you were producing something and you're in your studio, more than likely you're gonna put down the bass and drum track first and then build on top of that. Does that sound right? So I think that's also true in a live band, like in a jazz band, for example. You know, bass and drums have to be locked before you guys, like you step in with your saxophone or trombone or whatever it is, or a vocalist or piano. You know, now, let me back up for a second. I'm talk about the bass in that marriage for just a second. The bass is the only, well, this is arguable, but I think it's one of the only, if not few, but maybe the only instrument in the band that's actually doing two things all the time. All the time. We're playing rhythm and harmony all the time. So we're playing notes and we're playing time. Right? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So as a result of that, one of the things I submit to you as a bass player is that something we need to do is we need to work on both of those things. Right? Does that make sense? Okay, let me ask you this question. M, I'll ask you. If you were a bass player, and you are, of course, and you're playing, you got great time. Time is like metronomic, just impeccable time. But the harmony ain't. You're playing the wrong notes at the wrong time. Or the reverse. Playing all the right notes, but the time is like wobbly. What do you think will happen? Or
Which?
either one of those scenarios. In other words, I'm asking if you didn't have those two things together. What happens if the drummer and the bass player are not together? One of the things you said was maybe the drummer goes with you. What happens if the drummer doesn't go with you? You're kind of going in different directions.
The rest of the band doesn't know who to follow.
Right. So let me ask you guys a question, because I asked one of my mentors the same question. What do you do if you're a bass player in the band and you and the drummer are not agreeing on the time? Maybe the drummer is speeding up, maybe the drummer is slowing down. It might not be the drummer's fault, by the way. One of you is speeding up and the other is slowing down. What do you do in that situation as a bass player?
Match them.
Match them? Match them? What do you do? Okay. What do you do?
You hold your time.
Okay, you hold your time. Anybody else? Try to adjust?
Yeah.
Or let them know?
Right.
So it's really a choice, is what I'm hearing from you guys. Either you hold what you got, or you adjust somehow. Maybe signal, or you just follow them. There are pros and cons to each of those situations. It's important to talk about this too, really. It really, really is crucial. Because if I am playing and the drummer, we don't agree on the time, and I just say, okay, I'm gonna, because I know I got the right time, it's metronome, I've been practicing with my metronome, and I'm just gonna stay here, it's possible that you're gonna create a train wreck. Because the drummer might or might not readjust. You might be able to signal like you were saying, you know, or turn around and you're playing and it's like, you know, this is where, you know, whatever, you know. But my point is sometimes it's not just about me. You know, I've been in a situation where it felt like the drummer might have been pushing a little bit. And so for a minute there, I tried to, you know, hold back just to see if we can kind of readjust, but it got worse. So then I just said, okay, all right, I'm gonna follow this person. Another way that I've sort of adopted lately is maybe after the tune or after that set, just go buy them a cup of coffee. Say, hey man, I'm slowing down or I'm rushing. Am I, how does it feel to you? You know what I mean? In other words, have a talk about it. Because that's really an important thing. And I'm just going back to emphasize, if bass and drums are not locked down, everything else, even if they're adjusting along the way, as Big Dave was saying, as long as the people playing with them understand, that's fine. But if they're not really together, it's a problem. I don't know. Do you guys, of a signal for slow down? That's usually what, if it feels like the drummer is, in other words, if it feels like it's not me at that time, and it could be me. So, but if it feels like at that time, then maybe I'll, turn around, okay, M, this is where I think the tempo needs to be. Let's us get together and let's agree on that. Because otherwise, you're probably going to create a train wreck. Absolutely, that's a perfect example of what we're saying. Bass and drums got to really be locked. Really do. Like, drummers probably practice with metronome, right? We got to play time, so maybe we ought to practice with a metronome too. Let me ask you guys, and this is an aside question. Have you heard of this app called Drum Genius? I love Drum Genius. It's great because it's an app that has all of these drummers and rhythms in it. It's a metronome, except it's not just click, 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 click. It's got like Philly Joe Jones playing, and it loops. Or it's got like, Eric Harlan playing, or Lewis Nash playing, or whoever, it's all these, and it's not just swing. It's a lot of different types of rhythms, odd rhythms, and again, back to what I was saying earlier, that word, different Latin rhythms. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, they have them like really listed. Got songo in there and petito alto, it's a whole bunch of different rhythms that are genuine. So, yeah, I agree. That's a great example. I encourage all of you, by the way, as bass players, I encourage you guys to take drum lessons. Take drum lessons. Get you a kit and play some drums. I encourage all of you guys as bass players, take drum lessons, take vocal lessons, take piano lessons. Now, why did I say take vocal lessons? If you think of Sting, or who's another bass player that sings? Larry Graham. Paul McCartney. Exactly, Geddy Lee. The point I'm getting at is, if you get up here and you can sing the lyrics and the melody while you're playing bass, guess what? You just covered the whole gig. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not picking on you either. You really, really have covered the whole gig, because now you've got bass notes, you're playing harmony, you've got the time, but then you've also got the melody and the lyric. All of that's right there. So only reason you would hire M to play piano is to fill in, or if you hired Big D to play drums, you hire them to fill in. But you're covering the whole song. That's the point I'm trying to get at. So I totally encourage you guys, learn some lyrics, learn some melodies, because as Jay was saying, amongst other things, it helps you to understand where you are in the song so you don't get lost, right? But I mean, really, even if you hum it or you whistle it or whatever it is, fake hum it or whatever you do. But the point is that you can carry the whole song. But you see what I'm saying, though? Like, you heard everything. I wasn't singing the lyrics, but you heard the melody, you heard the time, you heard the chords, or at least the bass note for the chords. So now we're going to do it as two bass players. So again, what you want, melody or?
I'll do both.
You got melody. You got it. Count us in. You notice I'm asking him to count because he's got the melody, so he might hear it differently. You know, in other words, people don't usually ask us as a bass player to count a tune off. Really, I'm just being honest. They don't usually look at the bass player and say, Big Dave, what tempo you want? They usually ask the drummer or the person singing or the piano player or the horn player, right? Does that make sense? But he's going to do the melody, so what you count us in. So you see what I'm saying? That's like he's got the melody. But now let me ask you this. What tune was that? You guys know the tune, right? Bye Bye Blackbird. So what are the chords? Tell me the chords. What key was that?
F major.
It's an F. What are the lyrics? What are the chords? So here's the reason I'm asking these questions. Emma's looking at me like, oh gosh, why is he asking me these questions? But these are important questions because as a bass player, like it or not, we got to know this stuff. Like really. And as Jay said earlier, we really need to practice so that we can hear what we're doing. No, you were saying this earlier, see, wasn't Jay? Or maybe both of you guys. But in other words, hear what you're going to do before you actually play it. Now, what's the other thing that we have to deal with? We're playing, by the way, we're playing a tuning slide all night. You know, ain't no fret marks or glow in the dark, tape, you know, whatever, you know, there's none of that stuff. So, in other words, it really don't help me to look up here because I ain't gonna see anything. I'll see my hand, but that's not gonna help. It's not gonna make me play better in tune. So the point I'm trying to get at is intonation, a mirror. Get a mirror. Get a mirror. Get yourself a mirror. You can go to Walmart and get a mirror for what, 10 bucks, 15 bucks, or something. It's cheap. And use it though. Use it, like practice in the mirror, because that's gonna give you some of the best feedback that you could ever get. Aside from Big Dave, I'm asking Big Dave, man, how did you play this, you know? He might be able to tell me, but then I gotta actually go figure it out. And how to play it correctly, the best way for me to do it is not, aside from him telling me and me practicing, is me actually seeing it in the mirror and practicing to correct it. So then you don't have to look, you have to think about what you're doing when you're playing.
And then a video where
Oh.
you see later what you did.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, thanks for mentioning that. How many of you guys record yourself when you're playing? Like video and audio? You do both? I encourage you to do that all the time. And it's not a vain thing. It's not vain. It's feedback. It's direct feedback. It tells you exactly where you are, what you did, when you did it, where you were, who you were playing with. And guess what? Now this is where it could get kind of ugly. You can then go put on your recording, then go to YouTube and find Jimmy Blanton. Say, now, how did I match up with Jimmy Blanton? It might be kind of ugly at first, but then over time, it's like, oh, maybe it wasn't so bad after all. I'm learning this part of what Blanton did, or I'm learning this part. You see what I'm saying? So do that. If you haven't been doing that, please consider doing it. Get you one of them GoPro cameras. You know, they got the little clamp now. You can basically clamp it like right here on your bass. And you can aim the camera down and you see your hands the whole time. Really. I've done that a number of times. Other people want to see it. I'm like, nope. Nope. Not for you. It's just for me to get feedback. And plus, I deleted it after I got my feedback. So now let me ask you guys this question. You see these sticks we got? How many of you guys use these sticks? Why do you use these sticks? What do you think will be? There it is. The answer is intonation, intonation, intonation. Because otherwise, if we're just playing, That's like ding, 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 ding. It's short. But then suddenly, it's like, ah, you know, all of that happens. The other thing that I'm sure Big Dave can attest to this is, and it happens with piano, it also happens with piano, is when the piano is like tuned up perfectly and you play a note on the piano, you can hear all those overtones. Isn't that right, Em? Like, I guess if you put down one of your pedals and you play like an F, there's the F. But the only reason I knew that is because suddenly I heard this. You see what I'm saying? I don't know if you can hear it or not, but, and here, let me explain it like this. First note up there, it's really about that much space for us to play. What, in reality, the F is like really just right there. So in other words, to blow it up even bigger, just to make it like, you got this much space to screw up. And that's the only place in there that's right. Ain't but one place in there that's right. All of this other stuff is room for error. So if you play the note down here, it ain't right. You play it way up there, it ain't right. But when you play that thing like right smack in the center of the pitch, the bass opens up. All them overtones come out. And guess what else happens? If Big Dave is playing with a piano that's perfectly in tune, he's tuned up his bass perfectly, and he's playing that note like right there in the middle of that thing, piano player plays the chord, it's pretty amazing. I don't know if you can hear what I'm trying to explain, but you hear like there's suddenly this harmony that happens. Like the bass note comes out, all of those overtones comes out, the harmonics come out. Same with the piano, you play this, and especially the pianist has got one of the dampers down. Boom, all of that stuff happens. So that's why it's an acoustic bass. But it happens on the electric too. You just have to like listen carefully and you can hear that. I think, I can't prove this, but I think it happens on horns. I can't prove this because I don't know, but I think it kind of happens on horns. Everything that you said about learning a tune, I think is right. Everything. And I would add like a whole boatload of other stuff to it as well. Everything you said was right. Like, for example, when was the tune written? Who was the composer? Was it written for a musical? Was it in a movie? Was it in a show? What key was the original? Like, okay, maybe you got a recording that you really like, but is that the original chord changes? Was that the original tempo? Was that the original, you know what I mean? So, can you find the original person playing their song? You might not like that one, but that's probably where you get the most information. Let me ask you guys this. Do you listen to that elevator music sometime? Muzak? You know what I'm talking about? You know, you get on the elevator like, you know that kind of stuff? It seems like real square, doesn't it? It's like, it's not dancing. Here's the point I'm getting at. Check that stuff out. And the reason is because usually that's a place where they're going to play the melody as straight as possible, as simple and as by the book as possible.
And the harmonies too.
And the harmonies too. Because, and I'm saying that because I think that once we hear the song simply and as clear as possible, then it's possible to understand somebody that took it to a different place and reinterpret it or reharmonize it, or maybe different key signature. Maybe it's a different time signature. Maybe it's a different tempo. You know, maybe they changed the lyrics. Maybe they added a verse to the song. That's a whole nother discussion right there, is a verse. That's a whole big discussion right there, just verses. You know, a lot of these songs have like a little song before the song. It's called the verse. Sometimes the verse is nicer than the song is. So all I'm getting at by asking the question about how you learn tunes, as bass players, we have to have our tune learning system. Jay has heard me say this before, but we have to have a system, a very efficient and effective and quick system of learning songs. Because guess what? If we only learn, going to your point, if you only learn how to play music sight reading, then you haven't really, in my view, you haven't yet developed your ear. The reverse is true too. If you only learn by ear, then you haven't yet developed your eyes. Both are required. Both are crucial. So I think we need to have both. If you can only play songs by ear, you're cutting yourself off from a whole lot of gigs that are possible that are reading gigs, and vice versa. If you can only read, then you're cutting yourself off from a whole bunch of hearing gigs. I'm not saying do it for the gigs. I'm just saying do it to be a better musician. The other thing that Dave said, I want to point this out, and it's very important, is in your learning chord changes to a song, how do you do that? How do you learn and remember chord changes to a song? How do you do that?
The way the chord.
So form, movement of the chords, movement of the root notes. Now, let me ask you this question. What happens when you change key? Like if you're playing giant steps and somebody says, well, let's play it up a half step. How you do that?
Just move all the chords up.
Right. I agree with what you're saying. I agree 100%. The other point that I'm getting at, sort of specific to what Big Dave was saying, is learn the movements, learn the relationships.
Yeah.
And another way of saying the same thing is, and this is something that folks used to do, it's a thing called figured bass. It's called figured bass. And rather than sing like a G7 flat 5, it might be 2, then 5, then 1. You'll have the quality of the chord, but you'll have 2 with that quality, 1 with that quality. It might be 2 flat 5, 7, and then you might have 1, 7, flat 9 going to, 5, flat 7, flat 9 going to 1, something like that. But my point is if you can learn it using figured bass, then that makes it a lot more portable. You know, you just move it around. You don't have to think about
You do it in 12 keys instead of 1.
Right, that's right. And then you just automatically move. It's not, now sometimes, not always, sometimes on the electric, you can just slide up or down and use the same fingering across. Some of that's true on the upright bass, but some of it's not true. Still, I think it helps to go ahead and just learn the tune that way. That's not the only way. I think we need to learn tunes a lot of different ways. You know, hey man, sometimes there's this one band I was with, I don't care where we were playing, the guy never ever told me what we were gonna play. It pissed me off. Like the very first gig, he says, hey man, we're gonna learn these, I want you to go learn these 2 CDs. He gave me the 2 CDs. So I went home and I was learning, I was transcribing, I was writing down my little chord charts, had me a little book, you know, all of it was neat and organized. Got to the first gig, pulled out the stand, had my music up there, and had all of the charts and everything ready to go. Okay, what we're gonna play? He didn't play one of those songs. For the first 3 weeks, he didn't play one of those songs. And so, I'll never forget this. A guy was in the audience, a great, great piano player, who I had known before this gig. And he saw me up there with my little music stand and my little chords. And he walks up to me after the very first set, and he says, Herman, lose the music. That's what he told me. And I knew him before, and I knew he had always given me great advice. So I just threw away the music. And from then on, I was okay with that gig. Because I just had to learn how to learn the song, like right there, right now, the very first chorus. Because after that, he wasn't really, he's an old school piano player, so he would sort of, you know, if we were playing M and you were on bass, I might sit there and kind of guide you through the tune first time. But then, it's on you. Because I'm not going to be guiding you after that. So in other words, I had to develop my ear to hear and learn and remember a song like really, really quickly. It's always a process. It's never like ending kind of thing. But so I'm just saying, learn through eyes and learn through ears, but also learn through, like you said, who wrote the song? Who was the original person that wrote the song? And per your point, I agree with you. You should definitely check out as many versions of a song as you can. Don't overlook the original composer if you can find that. You might have to dig sometimes to find it, but don't overlook that one. You might not like it, but they're going to give you probably the most information.
And
Actually, that's a good question, and the answer is yes. For example, one vocalist I was asking a bunch of questions to in a session, and this person suggested to me, rather than try to sing the song, before you do that, maybe just say the lyrics as though you're talking to someone. You know, like, my romance doesn't mean a thing. You know, I'm saying, rather than try to sing it and interpret it, just maybe say the lyrics first and get how you would actually just speak it to somebody. Does that make sense? Because then you start understanding a little bit, at least the beginning process of how to interpret the song. You know, like, I might say something to Big D differently than I might say to J or to M or to S. You know, I might say it differently. Not that they're better or worse, but I just might say it, like, I've been knowing Dave for a long time, so I would just, you know, shoot the crap with him. You see what I'm saying? But, so, per your question, that's a great question. That's one thing that I learned how to do. And then going back to what Jay was saying earlier, the lyrics and the melody, that's really the meat of the song. Everything else, the rhythm and the harmony, is around that. So get that down. You won't get lost, and then you'll always know where you are, and then you can pick better bass notes. Because you know our job is pretty much boils down to playing the right note at the right time for the right reason. That's it. Thank you, guys.